principle of government. Now, this is one of the places where our founders thought that they had really achieved something. And truth be known, it failed. But it failed simply because people decided not to observe what they had put in place. I told you that the greatest fear our founders had was a centralization of power. What they attempted to do was divide power vertically and horizontally so that nobody could get too much of it. The vertical separation of power is called federalism. It's where different powers are allocated to different layers of government, whether it's municipal, state, or federal. As was pointed out in the quiz earlier, 17th Amendment to the Constitution. Originally, the House of Representatives in Congress was to represent the people. The Senate was to represent the states. This was an effort to make sure that the states were always there to counterbalance the federal government, and to use a word that has been used in history, to interpose between the federal government and the people. The ideal model for Wilson was the parliamentary system, and he said this. Wilson liked the parliamentary system because in that system, the executive and the legislature are essentially united. So, vertical separation of powers, federal, state, local. The horizontal separation of powers, is called separation of powers. Here what the founders did was they set up a national government that had an executive, a legislative, and a judiciary. So what they were trying to do here was to disperse power between different layers of government and disperse power across different bodies of government within the same layer. What's the word I'm looking for? Branches of government. Branches. And once again, this has gone awry because the judiciary, I think, has largely failed in its responsibility. I think some of that can be traced back to FDR threatening to pack the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court kind of folded like a cheap tent. But the founders' intent here did not work out the way they intended it to work out. And that can be kind of understood when you have people who are saying that I believe in a living constitution. Well, what they're saying when they say they believe in a living constitution is, I'm not going to observe the written constitution. A couple of years back, I went to a Christmas dinner in Washington, D.C., where the speaker was Justice Clarence Thomas. And he only spoke for a few minutes, and then he wanted to just answer questions. And everybody got to write down questions, and you sent them up front, and they picked the questions they wanted to ask him. My question, which was fortunately one of the ones that was picked, was, I said, does the idea of a living constitution negate the purpose of having a written constitution? And Justice Thomas said, you're either trying to apply the text as it was written, or you're making it up as you go along. I thought that was pretty simply put. I was surprised all evening at how politically incorrect Justice Thomas is, but it's a lifetime appointment, so he can pretty much say anything he pleases. Let me see here. Wilson and the Progressives on the separation of powers. For Wilson and the Progressive, the separation of powers had come out of the founders' obsessive fear of majority tyranny, and thus they thought the system was outdated for the present age, where the government no longer represented a danger to the people. Well, we've already talked about that one and how many people lost their lives in the last century due to their own government.